Welcome to My Safety Tech Podcast with me, your host, Pete Thomas. Hey, it's Pete Thomas here with another episode of My Safety Tech Podcast. And in this episode, we're doing something slightly different. It's just me, no guest, just me, half an hour talking about everything that I've learned over the past 16 episodes of My Safety Tech Podcast. So just take you back in time. I set up this podcast as a safety professional because I wanted to learn. I guess I've got another 20 years in this game, and I know that digital transformation is coming for our industry, right? We can see it. We can see it in every other industry. We talk about AI like it's a new thing, but it's been around for ages. In actual fact, when I Googled it, I was shocked at how old it is. And I'm shocked at how long it's been making waves, should I say, in other industries and other professions. I feel like it's now just our turn. Like it's our turn in safety for AI to get to us and to really help us make the difference that's needed. And so I felt like I wanted to be ahead of the curve. Like I want to learn, but I don't want to do some computer programming course. I struggle to download apps on my phone. So what I wanted to do was learn from the people that are building these systems, that are the visionaries, the tech entrepreneurs, but also really the safety leaders in our industry that are taking this tech forward and using it in their professional role to make a difference in what they're doing. So I set up my Safety Tech podcast. It's a way that I can have these conversations, I can learn, but not only that, it's a way for me to give back to our profession, to our industry, by sharing this information and knowledge with, all of you amazing listeners. So first of all, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all your support. Thank you so much for all your kind messages. Thank you to everyone who's followed my Safety Tech podcast on the LinkedIn page. Like it really, really does make a difference. And like, please, if you're listening to this, like and subscribe, and I'll explain to you why it makes a difference. Okay. So, as a podcast, we want to get the best guests on the show. Like, we want to get the best guests on the show, but the best guests, their time is precious. And they're sort of saying, well, how many listeners have you got? More likes, more subscribes means that more people find the podcast, means that we get more listeners, means that we can have the very best guests from our profession. And yeah, if you're listening to this, please hit like and subscribe. Please give us a little follow on the LinkedIn My Safety Tech podcast page and drop us a thumbs up or drop us a message. Like it really does make a difference. So thanks very much. So the last couple of months have been absolutely hectic. I obviously started working at Intuity. Now, this is not a sales podcast, so I don't want to be sitting here banging on about Intuity for the next half an hour. By the way, I've got to be honest, I've recorded this podcast like 5 times now, and every time I delete and start again. Weird, because if I record one with a guest, you've just got to go with it. Like you can't re-record it. But on my own, I'm like, no, I could do that better. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do that again. So I've recorded it like 5 times. One of the versions, I realized that I was banging on for about 15 minutes about how good Intuity is. And then I was like, Pete, come on, man. This isn't a sales platform. Like no one's tuned into this to be like front loaded with the very best AI risk assessment platform that they're actually. No, I'm joking. No, honestly, but it's been amazing because when I got into this, like I say, I just wanted to learn. And now I'm at a point where, I work for a tech company. Like, how cool is that? I've made the transition from health and safety into tech. And, yeah, that's just awesome. And I think, my advice would be to any safety professionals that are looking to get into this tech space is honestly what I found over the past 16 episodes is that people working in tech, they really, really want to work with us. They really want to work with us as a safety profession. Like often they've got into this business because of a strong moral point. For some people, safety is a very emotional topic because they've had something happen to them or happen to a family member or they've seen something happen. And a lot of them have gone, do you know what? I want to make a difference. And they realize that by working with safety professionals, they can actually make more of a difference. So I think that's one of the first things that I've learned since doing this podcast is that the tech industry, the tech space really wants to work with us as safety professionals. All you've got to do is reach out. All you got to do is that safety professional that goes, do you know what? I want to help. And honestly, they're so receptive. Not only that, I've been speaking a couple of events. I spoke at the Northumbrian Water. Northumbrian Water Group's Innovation Festival or Festival of Innovation. Honestly, what a phenomenally run event. Has to be on your calendar for next year. Free to attend. Northumbria Water Group, they set it up and it was up in Newcastle. It was a really, really great event, really enjoyable, really well organized. And it was a pleasure to speak up there. And, as a speaker, I think very differently about safety, or I like to think that I do. I've spoken to a lot of safety professionals, and I like to think that I've got something interesting that's slightly different about the subject matter that I care so much about, right? So I want to speak about it. Like I want to share. And I find that when you talk about something, you learn as well. Like every time you learn so much because it's like you have to know what you're talking about because you're really putting yourself out there. You're really vulnerable. And because of that, public speaking is something that I just find so flipping scary. Like it is, I'm literally, before I would speak publicly about something ages ago, I was crapping myself. And I ended up going on a course with a guy up in Bristol that was designed for people who are petrified of speaking. And it was only then that I learned that actually I'm not alone. There are loads of people that are petrified about public speaking. And I did this course and they make you stand up in front of like an audience of people that are also the same as you and petrified of public speaking, right? And you do that for like 2 days. And eventually you kind of realize that it's not so bad. And I feel like that's where I've been as a public speaker. It's like the goal is just to be able to get up there and get words out and for the words to be to make some sense. But I think now that I feel like I'm over that now. Like I feel like I'm actually more excited about public speaking. I'm more excited to share the message that I've got. But similarly, I speak on this podcast and, speak at events, and I sort of feel like I really want to work now on how I deliver what I'm presenting and not just have it make sense, but really learn how to get the message across that I want to get across, like how to articulate the story in the way that I want to tell it. Yeah, it's something that I'm excited to try. And the other thing that I'm excited to look at is for some sort of content writing training, not to the point of view that would call myself a content writer, but I've just found that I can take a very long time trying to write something on LinkedIn. And it's things that I could say in far fewer words. So it's something I'm really interested in. Plus, I find that, with the website now, with my safety consultant, when I'm putting out content, when I've worked with companies to put out content, it's been so AI'd, so ChatGPT. And that is the downside, I guess, of AI. If there's any downside, it's just that people just abuse it. Do you know what? I'm just going to be blunt. I see this on LinkedIn all the time from safety professionals where they're just copying and pasting ChatGPT into LinkedIn. And it's like, it's like they think that we don't know. It's like we know you're copying and pasting this from ChatGPT into a LinkedIn post. It's the way it's laid out, like leverage your qualifications or elevate your safety profession, and then it's like number one asterisk asterisk, they're one hyphen asterisk asterisk, and then it'll go into what it wants to say. You're like, I know that's ChatGPT, I know that's how it's structured. Stop doing that. It's really annoying. I wish someone would reach out to them and say, look, we know that you're just copying it. And the weird thing is some of them, they're like really ironic posts. So there'll be posts about how it's important to communicate how it's important to be like congruent with our messaging and safety, and then they've used like ChatGPT, and I'm like, oh my god, the irony, Jesus. So yeah, it's one of the things that I see quite a lot at the moment. That I just think it's a real. It's a real downside of what we're doing. But other than that, I think AI is awesome. So I think it's going to make a huge difference to our profession. I've got so many exciting things to talk about. But I mentioned about my safety consultant just then. My safety consultant's going from strength to strength. That's really cool. I love it. So, like for those of you that don't know, I set up my safety consultant as like an advertising and marketing platform for safety consultants to advertise their business. Right? It's a lot more than that in my vision for the platform. So, my vision for the platform is that safety consultants do an awful lot of work in our profession. And when we look at overall safety in the UK, I would say that we're pretty unique as safety professionals in that the majority of the work is done by safety consultants. And those safety consultants, though, they often work alone, right? They don't have access to all of the support that like an incumbent safety professional would have if they were like a safety manager within a company. And they also don't have access to any of the tech. So we've got this massive digital revolution coming in safety where, our profession is going to be unrecognizable in 5 years' time because of the amount of tech that we're going to have access to. And yet safety consultants aren't going to have access to that. And that's something that I really wanted to change. It's something that I really felt quite passionate about with my safety consultant. And I'm so chuffed that Intuity are on board. My safety consultant members, if they're obviously health and safety, they have access to Intuity, which is just incredible. And it was such a good feeling to be rolling that out this week. I've had so much positive feedback from my members. Yeah, it's going to be huge. It's a game changer. And I can't wait to be rolling out some other software, potentially to our fire risk assessors as well, who are on the platform. But my safety consultant's going from strength to strength. We've got 45 members now, which is brilliant in the short time that we've been doing it. We've got a team working on the SEO. We've got a team working on all the social media. We're on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, like all of these social media platforms, which, by the way, I don't like. I'm just going to be blunt. I am not the biggest fan of social media, but you've got to be on it. Like, we're running a business. You've got to be on it. I really want to use those platforms now to promote our members' businesses. It's all very well promoting my safety consultant going, hey, if you're a safety consultant, you need to be on here. I get that. It's not about that. It's about promoting our safety consultants' businesses, like really helping them to reach their clients and to promote their business. That's what it's about. And getting them the tech was just it's a huge win. Feels great. Feels really, really positive. Feels like we're making a difference. So now for something completely different. I've seen a lot on LinkedIn this week about the HSE's fatal workplace accident statistics. Statistics, man, I hate that word. Just makes it sound like data. 138 fatalities. Like, I don't want to depress you all, but that's 138 people that have tragically lost their lives that shouldn't have lost their lives. There's no two ways about it. And it's not just 138. It has a massive effect on anybody that's worked with them, anybody that saw it, anybody that knows them, any of their family, their friends. It's horrific. That number is not just that number. That number affects thousands and thousands of people, make no bones about it. It's tragic. I hate reading I hate reading that report, I'll say, and I never want to refer to that as data. Do you know what I mean? We're like, oh, these are the numbers, this is the data. It's too tragic to refer to it simply as data. It actually upsets me. Right, but it's also 50 years since we introduced the Health and Safety at Work Act. 50 years, okay. And when I think of the workplace 50 years ago, think of the workplace in the 1970s, by the way, I'm not that old. It just conjures up the image. By the way, I've worked in some places that felt like it was going back into the 1970s. But when we think of the workplace back in the 1970s, okay, when the Health and Safety at Work Act came in, okay, very different workplace. I'll admit it. It's a very different workplace, much, much more high-risk industries, a much greater level of risk within the workplace. But also the population was a lot lower. The working population was significantly lower in the 1970s than it is in 2023, 2024. But the number of fatalities, workplace fatalities, was huge, astronomical. 2,000 plus. I nearly said that word. The numbers aren't clear, and the numbers aren't clear because the recording wasn't even that good, but it looks like between 2,000 and 3,000. So when we say we've got 138, and this is what I see a lot on LinkedIn, is people will go, well, we've hit this plateau and we need to do more. And some people will say, what we're doing isn't working. And this is the bit that I really have concerns with, because no, the bit that we've done has worked really, really, really bloody well. We've gone from thousands of fatalities in the 1970s. We've introduced the legal requirement for risk assessment, introduced the legal requirement for safe system of work, introduced a ton of legal requirements. And we've done it, and we've done it well. And it's reduced the numbers down from, 2 to 3,000 down to 138. Like, we stand on the shoulders of giants from all of the safety professionals that have gone before us. And as a new generation of safety leaders, I feel like we owe a debt of gratitude to all of the safety professionals who have worked so hard over the years to get us to the point where we are. But it's now for us to take it that step further and to use the tools that we have access to in terms of tech, in terms of new knowledge, to be able to continue to reduce those numbers further. But make no bones about it, like, we're not going to be able to halve these numbers overnight. If I go out for a run now, okay, I can reduce my mile time significantly because I'm not a runner. There are some quick wins there. Like, I can go out for a run and my mile time will come down quite significantly. But if I'm Mo Farah, I am not going to be able to halve my mile time. I'm going to be aiming at the hundreds of a thousandths of a second improvement. And I'm going to have to work so hard to get those improvements. And I feel like that's where we are. 138 is an utter tragedy. We have an awful lot more work to do, but we need to not kid ourselves. We need to realize that this is going to be an awful lot of work. We're going to have to do an awful lot of work, and we need to use every tool at our disposal in order to continue to make the difference. That's how I feel about that. I read a quote which I really quite like, and it's bringing a Victorian mindset to the age of infinite leverage is like wearing boxing gloves to a drone war. And I really like that. I like that for a couple of reasons. One is it's a reminder that we've got access to the tech now, so we have to adopt it. We have to make the most of it as an industry, as a profession. But it's this concept of infinite leverage. And I feel like a lot of people don't look. I'm going to put my hands up. I don't even know what that means. Like, I don't even know what an age of infinite leverage looks like, because the concept of infinity is so vast, it's almost impossible for me to comprehend. And it reminds me of the old proverb of the chess game with the rice. I don't know if you ever saw that proverb. And there was a ruler in, I want to say it's like a Hindu proverb, so I want to say it was in India, and he was a ruler, and someone, like a traveling, like a traveling trader came along and then said, "Oh, I can beat you at chess, and what will we barter for this game of chess?" And he said, "Well, we'll barter a grain of rice for the first square on the chessboard, and then we'll double that every time for each subsequent square on the chessboard." And by the end, and it seems so simple, it's like a grain of rice per square on a chessboard, but by the end, the figure is so high that there wasn't enough rice left in the whole of India or something in order to pay the debt, And this is the point of this concept of infinity. It's that it's such a massive subject. It's such a massive number that it's hard to quantify where we are. So let me talk about efficiency versus efficacy. I feel like a lot of at the moment we see AI as an efficiency piece. And like I said about the content writing before, it's an efficiency piece. AI can do it quicker, but does it do it better? No, it doesn't. There's no way it does it better. Will it do it better eventually? Yeah, infinitely better. I've used that word. And I harp back to something that I said, a number of times about TomTom and SatNav. And I said that, when we when SatNav first came out, before that we had an A to Z map, and we would write down the directions of where we needed to go on a notepad prior to leaving on a long journey. We'd actually write down, like M5 junction 7, take the A whatever to there. We would write it down. And then the AA, I remember when the AA route planner came out, it was amazing. Like, you'd go online, you type in the AA, and then you'd go to the route planner, you put in the postcode of where you start, where you finish, and it would tell you how long it would take. Well, we never had that before. It would tell you how many miles it was, how many miles until the next junction, and I remember having, God, I can't remember what car I had back then, but it had like an analog odometer, so it would count up. So you could actually count and go, right, roughly in X amount of miles, I'm going to come off at the next junction. Like, it sounds so silly, but it wasn't even that long ago. TomTom then came out, and people were quite critical, similar to what they are about, ChatGPT at the moment. They were like, well, it kind of does it, but it makes a lot of mistakes. It takes you the wrong way. It would take people in silly directions, and, it had some issues. It wasn't perfect, but on the whole, it would give you the directions of where you needed to go without you having a map. So to me, it's an efficiency piece. It did it a little bit better, but with some drawbacks. Now we're on Waze, and Waze has now got the power to tell you what the traffic conditions are going to be like at some point in the future, and how long a journey is going to take you at some point in the future. It can predict what the traffic is going to be like at a distant point in the future based on all of the metrics that it has in the system. That to me now is efficacy, because it's not only done what I can already do, it's now doing way beyond what I can already do, way beyond what I am capable of saying what the traffic is going to be like tomorrow if I travel from, I don't know, Miami to Fort Lauderdale, country where, let's say, I've never driven that route. I'm in the UK, so I don't know it, and that's where I feel that we've got to. And I've no doubt that will continue to improve in time, that where when we start having driverless cars, which no doubt I will see in my lifetime, there will be a way for this software to be integrated into the vehicle, and the vehicle will automatically direct the route in order to proactively reduce the amount of congestion on a route. That's what I mean about efficacy. And I'm sure there are other things that this system can do that I've not even thought about. And I feel like that is where tech is taking us, not just from an efficiency piece to a real efficacy piece in terms of having that power of leverage at our fingertips as safety professionals. And there are some real challenges in safety that I think we need to overcome, one of which is collaboration. I heard this line a little while ago. Someone said to me, we're not having enough accidents in order to be able to improve safety. And I was like, ooh, okay, I don't like it. There's something in me that says that that's wrong. We shouldn't be aiming for that. But again, the concept of lagging indicators was introduced in the 70s when we had thousands of accidents, tens of thousands of fatalities. We had so much information that it was difficult not to make improvement through anecdotal observation. But now where we are today is we don't have enough data. Like, if you're in an organization, you have 10 accidents in a year. What can you really tell from that in terms of an analysis? It's not a big enough sample size in order to do any meaningful analysis from it. So the next concept then is, well, we need more data. Well, the difficulty with that is that we struggle to collaborate. We can't share data. There's commercial sensitivities. The data is all different in the way that we record it. It's really hard for us to share this. So how do we continue making improvements where we are now? We need a better measurement tool. We need a better way to measure, a more detailed way to measure that information. And again, I feel like this is something that tech can really help us to do, because it can help us to overcome the challenges of confidentiality and commercial sensitivity by sanitizing that information and then sharing it. One thing that Intuity does really well is it shares the output. So to me, the output would be a control measure. You produce a risk assessment, you look at the you look at the control measures that are required and then you implement it. If something goes wrong, you go back, you do a risk assessment, you implement more control measures. The system is so good that it knows that a new control measure has been implemented, and it looks at all of the other risk assessments that are being produced and goes, well, does this new risk assessment hold weight? Sorry, does this new control measure hold weight? Is this a new control measure that we need to share? Is this something that we need to provide to other people? It does that in a very considered and sanitized way, a confidential way. I think another thing that AI does really well is this concept of knowledge continuity. I like this concept of knowledge continuity because the workplace now in 2024 is very different to how it used to be. You used to work for organizations that had final salary pensions in place, that had staff that started their career in that organization and stayed there for 35 years until they retired. And then their children would come and work for the organization, their children's children. It was a very generational thing, and people grew up in that environment. I worked for a foundry years ago, and one of the furnacemen would tell me about his granddad working on the furnace. There was almost a sense of family identity from the place that they work, but that's just not the same anymore. Even if people weren't more career driven, which I feel like we are as a newer generation, we're more likely to move careers every couple of years, and I don't think that's frowned upon as much as it was even 20 years ago. I feel like moving jobs every 2 years would have been frowned upon, but now it's not. It doesn't seem to be as much anymore because times are changing so fast, and organizations are changing as well. Like, they're making people redundant. They're having rationalizations due to acquisitions, mergers. Organizations are changing, they're restructuring as they have to do because the external environment that they're working in is changing so quickly that they're having to be dynamic to change their business model to suit, right? I hope that made sense. So because organizations are changing, one of the issues that we've got is knowledge retention. We're losing this knowledge. I heard a company mention the other day that in one day, due to a merger, they'd lost nearly 300 years worth of experience from their safety team. And that is, with the way that we currently work in the safety profession, that's huge. That's going to have a monumental impact. A lot of times when we look at lessons learned, we store that information within the individuals within the safety team. Even if we document those lessons learned and put them in a specific file, if we're doing a really great job and we've learned loads of lessons, once you get to a point, it's impossible for someone to start within that company and learn all those lessons learned. Impossible. Even if we were to document it really well, imagine you open a file. At what point does that become inaccessible? When we have 50 lessons learned? Are you expecting someone that's new that starts with the company to be able to read through 50 lessons learned and apply those with the same level of detail that the whomever they replaced within the organization from that safety team, they just wouldn't be able to do it. And this is the thing, if you're a big organization, you've got thousands of lessons learned and they're all stored in a file, you'll have a new starter. No way. No way are they going to be able to go through all that information and apply it in any meaningful way because it's just not practical. So if anything, the better that we are at lessons learned, the worse we become at actually implementing what's required to prevent a reoccurrence of the original incident or accident, right? So this is something that I'm really interested in. But yeah, AI can help us with this. Like, AI has the ability to take in massive amounts of data and to be able to disseminate that data in the right way, in the right circumstances, at the right time. And this is something that I feel like we need to get a lot better at with knowledge retention in safety and some sort of knowledge continuity. I think that would be something that's really exciting. And I think this brings me on to my final point is around the risk assessment process. Okay, so, we produce a risk assessment and it's based on the continual improvement cycle. It's not based on it. Let me start that again. We produce a risk assessment and our safety management system is based on this process of continual improvement. Okay, so to me, the whole idea is that we produce something as good as we can reasonably practicably be expected to do. And then if it goes wrong, i.e., if there's an accident or incident, we review it at that point and put some more control measures in. Now, I have a couple of observations about this. First is, why can't we just do it as good as we can do it in the first place? I like the idea of continual improvement, but I struggle sometimes with this concept that we can just get to the end. Like, we can just improve something as good as it can go. And after that, any improvement is going to be cost prohibitive. And I'll give you a couple of examples. And by the way, I'm not saying this is fact. I'm just saying this is just it's a thought that I'm toying with. It's a thought that I'm thinking about. Okay, so say we take quality. There comes a point where to improve quality anymore becomes unnecessary and disproportionately expensive. And the other concept that I've been thinking about is, say, if you take something like fitness, there comes a point where to obtain a greater level of fitness becomes disproportionately detrimental to health. We'll have all seen that. Or take a bodybuilder. If a bodybuilder went, well, if I just get 1% better, and you're like, mate, you're on like 4% body fat and you look like a mutant, there comes this point, surely there comes this point in all areas where we go, yeah, continual improvement's just not working anymore. We're as good as we can be. Now, I'm not saying we're anywhere near that in safety. We're not. I know we're not. But there comes this point where I have to ask, could we ever get to the point where we've improved as much as we can do? And should that not be an aim that we're trying to achieve, rather than just always saying that we work on continual improvement, which to me almost bakes in this trial and error process. Well, I put a risk assessment in place. It's as good as I can make it now. And therefore, if it goes wrong, it's just part of the continual improvement process, i.e. trial and error. We're baking failure into it. I don't know. Don't hate me on LinkedIn. I'm just thinking about it. It's a problem that I'm just mulling over in my head. And the other thing that I'm really interested in is the control measures. So it was Nathan Haidt that said to me, well, the process that we work is that we'll put some control measures in place, as many as we think are necessary. And then if it goes wrong, we will go back and we will often layer up more control measures like building blocks. But we don't necessarily go back and review the initial control measures and go, why didn't they work? And are they still effective? If not, can we get rid of them? And I like this because it's this whole idea that, well, control measures are our safety spend. As an organization, we're spending our money on the control measures for safety. If they're not working, why are we spending money on them? One of the problems is it's very hard for us to quantify if they're working or if they're not. And we don't have the mechanisms in place to be able to quantify the efficacy of the control measures. And actually, oftentimes we don't have the measures in place to be able to quantify the financial cost of those control measures. And I'll give you an example. So I mentioned in the podcast recently with Peter Clark about this concept of stealth spend in safety. So say, for example, if I want to provide fire safety training to the organization as a safety manager, and I pay for an external consultant to come in and provide that training, oftentimes that training cost, the direct training cost, will be quantified and it will be attributed to a budget, either a safety budget, a training budget, maybe a HR budget, but it will be quantified and we will know how much that spend is. The time taken for the staff to attend the training often isn't quantified. That's not considered. And that's something that I think in safety we need to start to get better at. And maybe it's not even a safety thing, it's an organizational thing. Because without that knowledge, we don't know the true cost of how much we're spending on that. I've said this a lot about toolbox talks. Does a toolbox talk work? Who knows? Anecdotally, people have told me on LinkedIn, no, they don't work. Well, if they don't, why? Is that because we've delivered it poorly, or I don't understand why? We kind of know, that it doesn't work, but we don't know why. And the other thing is we don't know how much it costs. If we can work out the efficacy of the control measure, how effective that control measure is, and we can work out how much it costs to implement that control measure, then we can start to make a real difference in safety, because then we can start to work out if a certain control measure is reasonably practicable. Because if it's not reasonably practicable, we don't have to do it. If it's going to make 0.005% difference on the likelihood of an accident occurring, and even if the accident does occur, the severity isn't that high, for example, but it's going to cost us £200,000 to implement it, then invariably we've got the evidence there to be able to say, well, we don't do that. That to me is where we're going to start to make a difference as safety professionals. That to me is where tech is going to help us to make a difference. And that's coming in the next 5 years. Like, I can see that. I can see that clear as day, us being able to attribute real numbers to our control measures. And I think a lot's got to change for us to be able to do that. Context is everything in safety, but context is quite difficult when we start to put that into software. I think. I don't think it's that hard, but I think that's one of the challenges is to get context into what we're asking tech and AI particularly, to make decisions on. I think context is everything. But I also think that with our hazards, for example, we have an infinite number of hazards within safety, and that's because they're not broadly categorized. If we could broadly categorize hazards, then we could start to identify which are our greatest hazards within organizations, and then we could start to identify which are our greatest hazards within industries, and then we start to identify which are our greatest hazards nationally. So I'll give you, for example, nationally, work at height or falls from height is probably one of the biggest hazards. It's the biggest hazard because it's the one that everybody knows is the highest number of workplace fatalities per year. But that doesn't mean that for every organization that's the greatest hazard. For some organizations, even if they specialize in working from height, the greater their level of specialism in that area actually may indicate that there's a significant reduction in harm, meaning it's not their greatest hazard anymore, because they put so much energy and effort into controlling it that actually it's not the greatest hazard. But we don't know that level of detail and that level of information, and in safety, we're very good at using moral, legal, and financial arguments to encourage safety spend from the board. A moral argument. Look, we've got to look after our staff. And if we look after our staff will look after us. Our staff will be more productive. They'll be more engaged. And therefore, we'll have greater output as an organization and we'll become more profitable. Right? So it's a good moral argument. Actually, it's a terrible moral argument. I'm sure people could come up with better moral arguments, but it's my attempt at a moral argument. Legal. Well, Section 2 of the Health and Safety at Work Act says blah, and because of that, we've got to do X, Y, and Z. We're very good at legal. And in fact, some organizations are so frustrated at how good we are at legal that, they will tell you, we don't want safety professionals just to quote the law at us. Very weird because, it's one of the things that's going to get us into trouble, right? And then we've got the financial argument. And for me, the financial argument for me has been, for a very long time, it's been sitting in a boardroom and going, well, you can't put a price on safety. Or if you think safety is expensive, try having an accident, or some other cliched line. It's very hard when I go into a boardroom and say, hey, can I get £50,000 to invest in this product, this safety initiative, this spend? And they go, okay, how do we measure its performance? And how do we determine whether it's been effective in terms of the ROI on our investment and our spend? and we fall down. We fall down every time. It's very, very hard to get that bit right. And that's so important because I think we're good at the other two. We're good at the moral and the legal, but we're not very good at the financial. And at that point, I feel like we lose the budget holders and we lose those, the financial directors, the people that have got hold of the purse strings. And if we can get this financial argument right, I feel like we can really start to make a difference in safety. And I genuinely believe that tech is the answer to that. I think that tech is the thing that's going to help us to really nail down this financial argument to encourage boards to make a greater investment in safety. That's all I've got for this episode. That's what I've learned. That's what I've learned over the past 16 episodes. I'm very, very excited about where we're heading in safety. I'm really, really positive about tech. And I know there's some trepidation. I know there is. But I feel like this has been a well-trodden path. I feel like we're trailblazers in our profession, but we're not trailblazers in digital transformation. There are many, many organizations out there in the past that have adopted digital transformation early and that have adopted it well. And there are many stories of organizations that haven't. So some organizations that have done well, Auto Trader. Auto Trader, you used to go and buy the Auto Trader in a physical format. You'd circle the cars that you wanted to buy and you would telephone the number, right? All online now, all app-based. And they've absolutely revolutionized their business model and made themselves a dominant force in the age that we currently live in. An organization that didn't adapt to changing tech, Blockbuster. It's the most simplest. I'm sorry, we've all heard it. Blockbuster are approached with, it was rental on DVD. I remember when you used to rent DVDs and they would come through the post and then you'd have to return them in a little envelope. I think Blockbuster were approached with that idea and they said, no, that'll never take off. And then of course we went across to streaming and Blockbuster are gone. They're no more. They failed to adapt. Huge organization failed to adapt to changing tech. So there are so many scenarios out there about why we need to adopt this technology. But as I keep saying, when anyone ever says, yeah, but what happens if? Well, it's been done. We've done it. AI has been in finance for a very long time, and it's done phenomenally well in finance, for an industry that historically has many problems anyway. I'm not gonna lie about that, but yeah, I'm so excited about tech, so excited about where we're heading. Love what we're doing with the podcast, and very, very grateful for everyone that's stuck with us, everyone that listens to the show, everyone that promotes the show, as I say. Look, we're always looking for guests on the podcast. Always looking for guests. So if you know someone that's into tech and safety, if you know someone that's into innovation and safety, anyone that's sort of cutting edge as a safety professional that's really interested in this, that's using this to make a real difference in safety, then please give me a shout. Drop us a message on LinkedIn and let me know, because I'd love to chat to them. I'd love to have them on the show. The show is free. I think that's another thing that's important. Like, we're not building this to try and get sponsorship. Like, maybe I'd love to in the future, but we're not doing it for that. But I think it's important because I really believe in it. I believe in what we're doing. So, right, I'll stop rambling on. Thank you very much. And looking forward to you joining us with our next guest on my Safety Tech podcast. Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, then please like and subscribe. It really does make a difference to the show. Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode.